The colony ship Wanderer had been flying through space for 3 months when the computers picked up a strange signal. Captain Helen Morris stood in the control room, looking at the screens with worried eyes. Something was wrong out there in the darkness between the stars. "Captain, I'm getting a distress call," said Lieutenant Greg Hammond. His fingers moved quickly across the control panel. "It's coming from a ship about 2 hours away from us." Helen leaned forward to look at the data. The message was in a language she had never heard before. The computer was trying to translate it, but the words came out broken and strange. "What kind of ship is it?" Helen asked. Greg checked the readings again. "It's big, ma'am. Really big. And the life signs inside are getting weaker." Helen did not wait. "In space, when someone called for help, you answered." It did not matter if they were human or alien. That was the rule everyone followed among the stars. "Change course," she ordered. "Get us there as fast as we can." The Wanderer turned toward the distress signal. 2 hours later, they found the alien ship floating dead in space. It looked like a giant egg made of crystal, reflecting the light from distant stars, but the beautiful surface had ugly black marks where rocks from space had hit it hard. Helen sent a team to check the ship. Lieutenant Katie Price led the group, along with Dr. Alan Brooks and 3 other crew members. They put on their spacesuits and flew across the empty space between the 2 ships. Inside the alien vessel, they found something that made Katie stop and stare. Dragons. They were not exactly like the dragons from old Earth stories, but they were close enough. 12 young dragons, each one about as big as a large dog. Their scales were blue and silver, shining in the dim light. Their wings were folded against their bodies, and their eyes glowed with a soft light that showed they were smart and very, very scared. "Oh my God," Katie whispered into her radio. "Captain, you need to see this." Dr. Alan Brooks moved slowly into the room. He had studied many alien creatures in his career, but nothing like this. The young dragons were huddled together in the middle of a large chamber. They were making small crying sounds that the translation device could not understand. The room was cold. Too cold. The machines that kept the temperature right had broken when the rocks hit the ship. Near the wall, 2 adult dragons lay on the floor, not moving. They had died when the ship was damaged. "The little ones are in bad shape," Ellen said quietly. "They need help fast." Helen's voice came through the radio. "Bring them to our ship. We have to get them out of there before things get worse." But when the humans tried to get close to the young dragons, the creatures panicked. They ran in different directions, crying out in fear. One of them, bigger than the others, stood between the humans and the rest of the group. Small flames came out of its mouth, making the rescue team step back quickly. "They think we're going to hurt them," Alan said. "Without their parents to tell them we're safe, they're just acting on fear." Katie looked at the frightened creatures and felt her heart break. "How do we help them if we can't get near them?" Helen thought for a moment. Then she had an idea. "We need someone they won't be afraid of. Someone small and young like them." Back on the Wanderer, there was only one child on the whole ship. His name was Danny Cole, and he was 10 years old. His parents worked in the ship's garden section, growing food for the crew. They had brought Danny with them when they signed up for the 5-year mission to explore new star systems. Danny was in his room doing homework when his mother came to get him. Claire Cole looked nervous and excited at the same time. "Danny, something amazing has happened," she said. "The captain needs your help." "My help?" Danny put down his tablet. "What can I do?" His mother sat down next to him. "We found a ship with young alien creatures on it. They're scared and won't let the adults near them. Captain Morris thinks they might trust someone their own age." Danny felt his stomach flip. "Aliens? Real aliens?" "Yes, honey. And they need you." 20 minutes later, Danny stood in the doorway of the chamber where the young dragons were kept. His heart was beating so hard he thought everyone could hear it. The dragons were even more amazing than he had imagined. Their scales caught the light and seemed to change colors as they moved. The biggest dragon saw him and made a hissing sound, but it was not as angry as the sounds they made at the adults. It sounded more like a question. Danny's hand shook as he sat down on the floor. The captain had told him to move slowly and speak softly. He had brought his tablet with him, the one with all his favorite books and stories on it. "Hey," Danny said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "I know you're scared. I get scared sometimes, too. Space is a scary place." The dragons did not run away. They stayed where they were, watching him with their glowing eyes. Danny noticed they had stopped, shaking as much. He looked down at his tablet and found a story his grandmother used to read to him. Back on Earth, it was about a brave knight who was afraid of the dark but learned to face his fears. "Do you want to hear a story?" Danny asked. "It might make you feel better." The dragons tilted their heads, all of them looking at him now. Something about his voice seemed to reach them through their fear. Danny started to read. His voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger as he got into the story. He told them about the knight who lived in a big castle, about how the knight was brave during the day but scared at night, about how the knight learned that being afraid was okay, and that courage meant doing things even when you were scared. The dragons moved closer, not all at once but slowly, carefully. First one, then another, then all 12 of them. They formed a circle around Danny, their glowing eyes fixed on his face. Danny kept reading. He did not know if they understood the words. The translation computer was not working well with their language, but somehow that did not seem to matter. They were listening to something deeper than words. They were listening to the sound of his voice, to the rhythm of the story, to the feeling of safety it gave them. When he finished the story, the biggest dragon moved even closer. It rested its head near Danny's hand. The creature's scales were warm and Danny could feel it breathing. The dragon made a soft sound, almost like a cat purring. "You're going to be okay," Danny whispered. He slowly reached out and touched the dragon's head. The scales were smooth and warm. "I promise I'll help you." The dragon looked up at him with those strange, glowing eyes. And in that moment, something changed. The fear in the room seemed to fade away, replaced by something else. Trust. Captain Helen Morris watched from the observation window above. She had seen many strange things in her years in space, but this was something special. A human child and alien creatures, connecting across the vast differences between their species, connected by something as simple and as powerful as a story. "Record everything," she told her crew. "I think we just witnessed something important." Dr. Alan Brooks was already recording. His tablet showed readings from the dragons that surprised him. Their heart rates were slowing down. Their brain activity was becoming more organized. They were calming down, getting better just from listening to Danny's voice. "It's working," Alan said, wonder in his voice. "The stories are giving them what they need. Structure, comfort, a reason to stop being afraid." Down in the chamber, Danny had pulled up another story on his tablet. The dragons pressed closer, waiting for him to begin. He smiled, feeling less scared now. These creatures needed him and he was not going to let them down. "Okay," he said. "This one is about a girl who befriended a dragon. I think you'll like it." As he started to read, the 12 young dragons settled around him like he was one of them. Like he was family. None of them knew it yet, but they had just started something that would change both their species forever. All because a scared boy told stories to scared creatures and found out that some things work the same way everywhere in the universe. Stories had power. Stories could heal. And sometimes stories could build bridges between worlds. The first night was hard for everyone. The young dragons had been moved to a special room on the Wanderer. The ship's computers kept the room at the right temperature and made sure the air had what the dragons needed to breathe comfortably. But even with all the right conditions, the dragons were still upset. Dr. Alan Brooks spent hours studying the information his machines gave him about the dragons. He was trying to understand what they needed to be healthy and happy. "Captain Morris," he said, showing her his tablet. "These readings tell us something important. The young dragons are feeling something like what human children feel when they lose their parents. Their brains need constant activity and connection. Without it, they get sick." Helen looked at the data with concern. "Can we give them what they need?" Alan shook his head slowly. "Not with our technology. Their species uses a kind of mental connection that we don't understand yet. It could take months or years to figure out how it works. By then, these little ones might be too sick to save." But something was happening that the scientists had not expected. Danny had found a way to help the dragons feel better. Whenever the dragons started to get upset, their scales turning dark and their breathing getting fast, Danny would sit with them and read. It did not matter what story he chose. Old fairy tales, adventure books, even true stories from Earth's history. As soon as his voice filled the room, the dragons would calm down. They would gather around him in a circle, their glowing eyes watching his face as he read. Lieutenant Katie Price stood at the observation window, watching Danny with the dragons. "This is incredible," she said softly. Look how they respond to him. Lieutenant Greg Hammond frowned. But they can't understand English. Our translation system barely works with their language. How can stories in a language they don't know help them? Commander Lisa Grant had been thinking about this question. Maybe they don't need to understand the actual words, she said. Maybe they're responding to something else. The way his voice sounds. The pattern of how stories work with a beginning, middle, and end. Stories have structure, and structure makes them feel safe. Captain Morris nodded slowly. The boy is giving them what their parents would have given them. Not just information, but a way to understand the world around them. In the chamber below, Danny had just finished reading a story about a princess who made friends with a sea monster. The biggest dragon, the one Danny had started calling Scales in his head, moved closer and put his head on Danny's leg. The action was so trusting that Danny felt tears in his eyes. "You're safe now," Danny whispered, carefully touching the smooth scales. They were warm under his fingers. "I won't let anything bad happen to you." Scales made a noise that was half purr, half musical note. The other dragons repeated the sound, and Danny realized they were trying to talk to him. Dr. Alan Brooks ran into the room, almost dropping his tablet in his excitement. "Danny, don't move. Keep talking to them. The translation computer just picked up something amazing." Danny cleared his throat, suddenly aware that everyone on the ship was probably watching him. Okay. Should I read another story?" "Yes," Alan said eagerly. "Read anything. Just keep your voice steady." Danny picked a story about explorers finding a new land full of wonders and dangers. As he read, Alan's tablet started showing broken translations of the sounds the dragons were making. Safe, warm, story giver, pack friend. "They've adopted you," Alan said, his voice full of wonder. "In their species, the adult who gives them mental training during their early days becomes part of their family forever." "They think you're one of them, Danny." Danny looked down at the 12 dragons around him. He felt the weight of what that meant. These creatures were depending on him. But he also felt something else. He felt proud. He felt like he had a purpose. "Then I better do a good job," he said quietly. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Danny would wake up early, do his school lessons with his mother watching, then spend hours with the dragons. He read to them, played with them, and slowly taught them about the universe around them. The dragons got better and better under his care. Their scales became brighter. They moved with more confidence. And they started to show different personalities. Scales was protective and brave. A smaller dragon Danny called Shimmer was curious and playful. Another one named Ember was careful about new things but very loving once she trusted you. Captain Helen Morris watched all of this with mixed feelings. She was proud of what Danny was doing, but she was also worried. She had sent messages to the nearest communication station, trying to find representatives of the dragon species. But space was huge and answers took time. For now, the young dragons were humanity's responsibility. "Captain," Commander Lisa Grant said one evening, her voice tight, "we're getting a message." It's in the dragon language. Helen rushed to the control room. The message was short but clear. A dragon rescue ship was on its way, but it would take 2 more weeks to reach them. The message ended with a question that made Helen's stomach clench. "Are the hatchlings still alive?" She wrote her response carefully, explaining everything that had happened. When she got to the part about Danny, she stopped and thought. Then she added, "A human child has bonded with them. He has kept them alive and healthy by telling them stories." The answer took hours to come back. When it did, Helen read it 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. Impossible. Hatchlings only bond with their own species. No alien has ever successfully become part of a dragon family unit. Helen smiled grimly. She recorded a video showing Danny surrounded by 12 happy dragons, reading them a story about a boy who learned to fly. "Perhaps," she said to the camera, "it's time to change what you think is possible." The days passed slowly as everyone waited for the dragon ship to arrive. Danny spent every moment he could with the dragons. He was teaching them new words, both in English and in dragon language. The translation computer was getting better at understanding both languages now that it had more data to work with. One morning, Shimmer surprised everyone by speaking a full sentence in English. Her voice was rough and strange, but the words were clear. "Danny, tell story now?" Danny grinned. "Yes, I'll tell you a story. Which one do you want to hear?" "Flying story," Shimmer said, her wings fluttering with excitement. So Danny told them about airplanes, about how humans had dreamed of flying for thousands of years before they figured out how to do it. He told them about the first people who flew, about their courage and determination. The dragons listened with complete attention. When he finished, Scales spoke up, his English better than Shimmer's but still accented. Humans no have wings, but humans fly anyway. Humans brave like dragons. That's right, Danny said. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do things even when you are scared. Ember, the careful one, moved closer to Danny. Danny scared when first meet us? Danny nodded honestly.
Yes, I was really scared.
You were different from anything I'd ever seen, but I was more worried about you being scared than I was about my own fear. The dragons made a sound together, a harmonious note that Alan's computer translated as Pack Love Family Bond. Dr. Alan Brooks, watching from his station, felt his eyes get wet. He had seen many amazing things in his career as a scientist, but watching a human child and alien creatures form a genuine family bond was something special. Something that changed how he saw the universe. Captain, he said into his communicator, I think we need to prepare Danny for what's coming. When the dragon ship gets here, there are going to be some very difficult decisions to make. Helen sighed. She had been thinking the same thing. I know. But how do you prepare a 10-year-old boy to possibly say goodbye to creatures he's grown to love? I don't know, Alan admitted. But we have to try. That evening, Helen went to talk to Danny. She found him in the dragon chamber, all 12 dragons asleep around him. He was reading quietly, not wanting to wake them. Danny, Helen said softly, can we talk? Danny looked up and nodded. He carefully moved away from the sleeping dragons and joined Helen in the hallway outside the chamber. The dragon ship will be here soon, Helen began. We need to talk about what happens then. Danny looked down at his feet. They're going to take them away, aren't they? They're going to want to, Helen said gently. The dragons need to be with their own kind. They need to learn about their culture and their history, things we can't teach them. But I can teach them other things, Danny said, his voice getting louder. I can teach them about friendship and bravery and all the things stories teach us. Doesn't that count for something? Helen put her hand on his shoulder. It counts for everything. You saved their lives, Danny. But now we have to think about what's best for them in the long run. Danny wiped his eyes. What if being with me is what's best for them? That's the question, isn't it? Helen said. And honestly, I don't know the answer. But we're going to find out soon. Inside the chamber, Scales opened one glowing eye. He had not been asleep. He had heard everything. And deep in his young mind, a thought formed. Danny was pack. Danny was family. And dragons protected their family no matter what. The dragon rescue ship appeared exactly 14 days later. It came out of faster-than-light travel in a burst of bright light that lit up all the screens on the Wanderer. The ship was huge, 10 times bigger than the human colony ship. Its surface had patterns that seemed to move and flow like water. Captain Helen Morris had prepared her crew for this moment. But she had not prepared Danny. She found him in the dragon chamber reading a story about ancient Earth explorers while 12 dragons listened carefully. Danny, she said gently, they're here. The boy looked up and Helen saw fear flash across his face. Already? They've been traveling as fast as they could. Helen sat down next to him. You knew this was coming. The dragons need to go home to be with their own people. Danny nodded, but his eyes were bright with tears. He was trying not to cry. Scales felt his distress right away and pressed closer, making worried sounds. The other dragons did the same, forming a protective circle around their human friend. They don't want to leave me, Danny said softly. I know, Helen replied, but they need proper teachers. Others of their kind who can guide them as they grow up. We've done our best, but the communicator on her wrist made a sound. Captain, came Commander Lisa Grant's voice. The dragon representatives are asking permission to come aboard. They want to see the hatchlings right away. Helen stood up. Permission granted. Bring them to the dragon chamber. She looked down at Danny. Are you ready for this? Danny wiped his eyes and nodded. I have to be. The dragon representatives were 3 adults, each standing nearly 8 feet tall when they stood on their back legs. Their scales were darker than the hatchlings, with complex patterns that showed their age and importance. The leader introduced herself through a translation device as Elder Skyrend. She moved with grace and power. When she entered the chamber and saw the hatchlings, her calm face changed. She made a sound that needed no translation. It was pure relief and joy. The hatchlings responded with excited chirps and trills, recognizing something important in her presence. But when Elder Skyren tried to approach, Scales stepped between her and Danny. His wings spread halfway out in a protective stance. Skyren stopped, her glowing eyes getting wide. She spoke, and the translation device turned her words into English. The hatchlings are bonded. This was not in the report. We explained the situation, Helen said carefully. The boy kept them alive by telling them stories. He gave them the structure and comfort they needed to survive. You do not understand, Skyren replied, her voice heavy with meaning. A bond formed during the vulnerable period is permanent. These hatchlings will carry the mark of this human child for the rest of their lives. They will never fully fit in with their own kind. Danny felt sick to his stomach. I didn't mean to hurt them. I was just trying to help. Skyren's expression softened a little. You saved their lives, young human. That is not in question. But you have also changed them forever. They are something new now, caught between two worlds. She approached slowly, letting Scales inspect her, earning his trust through patient stillness. When she finally reached Danny, she studied him with an intensity that made him want to look away. Show me, she said. Show me what you did that worked when our own methods would have failed. Danny swallowed hard and picked up his tablet. I read to them. Stories from Earth. It made them feel better. Demonstrate. Feeling uncomfortable under the gaze of 3 huge dragons and his own captain, Danny picked a story at random. It was one of his favorites, about a lighthouse keeper who guided lost ships safely to shore during terrible storms. As he read, the hatchlings settled around him, their earlier excitement turning into focused attention. But Danny noticed something new. Elder Skyrend and her 2 companions were also listening, their head crests rising, and what he had learned was a sign of interest. When he finished, Skyrend was silent for a long time. Then she spoke words that would be remembered by both humans and dragons for generations to come. We have legends, she said slowly, of the storytellers, beings who could weave reality with words, who could heal wounded minds and inspire greatness. We thought they were myths, but perhaps, she looked at Danny with new understanding, perhaps they were just waiting among the stars for us to find them. Dr. Alan Brooks, who had been recording everything, stepped forward. Elder Skyrend, if I may ask a question. What are dragon hatchlings normally told during their bonding period? They are shown memories, Skyrend explained. The caretakers share visions of our history, our culture, our place in the universe. It is how we pass knowledge from one generation to the next. But Danny's stories did something similar, Alan realized. He gave them a framework for understanding concepts like bravery, kindness, and problem-solving. The content was different, but the function was the same. Skyren nodded slowly, and in doing so he created something that has never existed before. Hatchlings who understand both dragon and human perspectives, who can bridge 2 species. Captain Helen Morris felt the weight of history on her shoulders. Elder Skyrend, what happens now? The dragon elder looked at the hatchlings, then at Danny, then back at Helen. That, she said, is a question I cannot answer alone. This requires a council. Representatives from both our species must decide the fate of these unique children. They're not some kind of experiment, Danny said, his voice stronger than he felt. They're just kids who got scared and needed help. Skyren's eyes gleamed with something that might have been respect. You speak truth, young storyteller. But the fact remains that you have created a bridge between our species, and bridges once built change the landscape forever. Over the next few hours, plans were made. The hatchlings would stay on the Wanderer for now, while a special council was organized at a neutral station. Both human and dragon representatives would attend. The future of the 12 bonded hatchlings would be decided there. Danny spent that time with the dragons, trying to memorize every detail. The way Shimmer's scales caught the light. The sound of Ember's purr. The weight of Scales' head resting against his shoulder. What if they decide to separate us? Danny asked his parents that night. Marcus Cole put his arm around his son. Then we'll fight that decision. You saved these dragons, Danny. You've proven that humans and dragons can understand each other. That has to count for something. Claire added, the whole crew supports you. Captain Morris supports you, and I think Elder Skyrend does too, even if she's worried about what it all means. The next morning, the Wanderer set course for the neutral station. The journey would take 3 days. During that time, Danny continued his routine with the dragons, reading to them, teaching them, learning from them. Elder Skyrend often watched these sessions. She was fascinated by the bond between the boy and the hatchlings. In thousands of years of dragon history, nothing like this had ever happened. One evening, she approached Danny after the hatchlings had fallen asleep. "May I ask you a question, young storyteller?" Danny nodded, a little nervous. "What is it about stories that has such power?" Skyrend asked. "Why do they work where other methods fail?" Danny thought about it for a moment. "My grandmother used to say that stories are how we make sense of the world. They show us that other people feel the same things we feel, that we're not alone. When I tell the dragon stories about brave people or kind people or scared people who find courage, they see themselves in those stories. It helps them understand their own feelings." Skyrend was quiet for a long time. "You are wise beyond your years, Danny Cole. Perhaps that is why the hatchlings trust you so completely." "I'm not wise," Danny said. "I just love stories. And I love the dragons. I don't want them to be taken away from me." "I know," Skyrend said gently. "But you must understand, young one. The decision that is made will affect not just you and these 12 hatchlings. It will affect how our two species interact for generations to come. That is a heavy burden." "I don't care about all that," Danny said, his voice breaking. "I just care about them." Skyrend reached out with one clawed hand and gently touched Danny's shoulder. The gesture was awkward, but clearly meant to comfort. "That is why you are so important, Danny Cole. You do not think about politics or species relations. You simply care, and sometimes that is the most powerful force in the universe." The 3 days passed too quickly. Soon the Wanderer arrived at the neutral station, a huge structure that served as a meeting point for many different alien species. Danny had never seen so many different kinds of beings in one place. Creatures made of light, beings that floated in special suits filled with gas, and dozens of others he could not even begin to understand. But today, all attention was focused on 2 species. Humans and dragons. The council would meet the next morning. Danny tried to sleep that night but couldn't. He kept thinking about the hatchlings, about what would happen if the council decided to separate them. Scales seemed to sense his distress. The young dragon had gotten bigger over the past weeks and could no longer fit easily in Danny's room. But he pushed his head through the doorway and made a soft questioning sound. "I'm okay," Danny lied. Scales made a noise that clearly meant he did not believe that. Danny sighed and got out of bed. He sat down next to Scales, leaning against the warm Scales. "I'm scared," he admitted. The council chamber was the biggest room Danny had ever seen. It was shaped like a huge dome, with seats rising up in circles all around. Beings from dozens of different species sat in those seats, all watching the center floor where the speakers would stand. Danny sat in the observation gallery with his parents, looking down at the representatives who would argue over the hatchlings' fate. The dragons wanted them returned to their homeworld for traditional education. The human representatives, led by Ambassador Patricia Lane, argued that breaking the bond with Danny would cause psychological harm to the young dragons. "This is wrong," Danny whispered to his mother. "They're talking about them like they're things, not people." Claire squeezed his hand. "Politics is complicated, honey. Everyone thinks they're doing what's best, but nobody's asking the dragons what they want," Danny said. His father, Marcus, leaned over. "You're right. Maybe you should tell them that." Danny looked up, surprised. "Me? They won't listen to a kid." "You'd be surprised," Marcus said with a small smile. "You've already done something everyone said was impossible. Maybe you can do it again." Down in the council chamber, the debate was getting heated. Elder Skyrend stood before everyone, her scales changing colors with barely controlled emotion. "You cannot understand what you have done," she said to the human representatives. "The bonding period is sacred to our kind. These hatchlings will be forever different from others of their age, forever separate from their own culture." Ambassador Lane replied, "But they will also be uniquely able to bridge the gap between our species. Isn't that valuable?" "Valuable?" Skyrend's voice carried anger now. "They are children, not diplomatic tools." "That's not what I meant." "Excuse me," a young voice interrupted. Everyone turned to see Danny standing at the entrance to the council chamber. 2 guards moved to stop him, but Captain Morris stepped forward. "Let him speak," she said. "He has more right to be heard than any of us." Elder Skyrend studied the boy for a moment, then gestured for him to come forward. Danny walked into the center of the chamber on shaking legs. He was very aware that hundreds of eyes, both human and alien, were watching him. My name is Danny Cole, he began, his voice small in the huge room. I'm the one who bonded with the hatchlings. I didn't mean to cause problems. I just wanted to help them because they were scared. A dragon representative spoke. Child, do you understand what you have done? These hatchlings will never fully fit in with their own kind because of you. I know, Danny said. But maybe that's not a bad thing? He paused, trying to find the right words. You're all talking about what's best for them, but you're treating them like they belong to one side or the other. What if they don't have to choose? Ambassador Lane frowned. What do you mean? The stories I told them, Danny explained. They were about people from different places learning to work together, about building bridges and finding common ground. Maybe the hatchlings aren't broken or damaged. Maybe they're just new, something that didn't exist before. Skiren tilted her head. Continue. On Earth, we have stories about people who grow up between two cultures, Danny said, feeling more confident now. They see things differently than people who only know one way. They can help both sides understand each other. Maybe that's what the hatchlings could do. A murmur ran through the gathered representatives. A being made of crystal spoke in tones that sounded like bells. The child speaks wisdom. Perhaps this bonding is not a tragedy but an opportunity. But practical concerns remain, another dragon representative argued. Where will the hatchlings live? How will they be educated? They need dragon knowledge to understand their own biology and heritage. And they need human contact to maintain the bond that saved their lives, added a human diplomat. Danny took a deep breath. What if we shared? The hatchlings could spend time learning dragon culture and history, but they could also spend time with humans. They could have teachers from both species and... He looked directly at Elder Skyrend. I could keep telling them stories. Not to replace dragon teaching, but to add to it. The council chamber fell silent. Then Elder Skyrend began to make a sound, a deep rumbling noise that the translation devices struggled to understand. After a moment, Danny realized she was laughing. Out of the mouths of younglings comes clarity, she said. The human child proposes what we adults could not see. A true partnership. Not ownership, not division, but cooperation. Ambassador Lane nodded slowly. A joint educational program. The hatchlings would split their time between human and dragon instructors. Danny would continue his role as storyteller, while dragon mentors would teach them about their heritage. It is unprecedented, Skyrend acknowledged, but then so is everything about this situation. She looked at Danny with what might have been approval. Tell me, young storyteller, are you prepared for such a commitment? To be part of these hatchlings' lives for years to come? Danny thought about Scales and Shimmer and Ember and all the others. He thought about the trust they had placed in him, the way they looked to him for comfort in their darkest moments. Yes, he said firmly, they're my friends. You don't abandon your friends. A dragon elder from the back of the chamber stood up. But what of the boy's education? His own life? We cannot ask a child to sacrifice his future for our young. I'm not sacrificing anything, Danny said. They've taught me just as much as I've taught them. Maybe more. Before I met them, I was just a kid who liked to read. Now I'm part of something bigger, something important. Captain Morris stood up in the gallery. If I may speak, the crew of the Wanderer supports this plan. We're willing to alter our mission to accommodate a joint education program. We can establish regular contact between the hatchlings and dragon teachers while maintaining Danny's bond with them. And what happens when the boy grows up? Another dragon asked. When he has his own life, his own family? The hatchlings may live for hundreds of years. Will he abandon them then? Danny felt the weight of that question. He had not thought that far ahead. I don't know what will happen when I grow up, he admitted. But I know I'll never abandon them. Maybe when I'm older, I can help train other humans to be storytellers, to help other young dragons or other species who need it. This doesn't have to be just about me and these 12 dragons. It could be bigger than that. Elder Skyrend made a thoughtful sound. The child sees further than we do. He speaks not just of these hatchlings, but of a new way for species to connect, through stories, through shared understanding. The council debated for another hour. Danny sat quietly, listening to beings from across the galaxy discuss the future of his friends. Some were supportive. Others were concerned about setting a precedent. But slowly a consensus formed. The hatchlings would become wards of both species, raised in a new program designed to honor both their dragon heritage and their human bond. Danny would serve as their storyteller and friend, spending regular time with them as they grew. Dragon mentors would teach them the skills and knowledge of their people. Human teachers would provide additional education in science, history, and other subjects. A special facility would be built, half on a human station and half on a dragon outpost. The hatchlings would move between both locations, learning to be comfortable in both worlds. When the final decision was announced, Danny felt tears of relief running down his face. They had won. The hatchlings would not be taken away. They would stay together. As the council session ended, Elder Skyrend approached Danny. "You have done something remarkable, young human. You have shown us that perhaps the barriers between species are not as solid as we believed." "The stories taught me that," Danny replied. "All the best ones are about different people learning to understand each other." "Then perhaps," Skyrend said, "you should tell us more of these stories. Both our peoples could learn from them." That evening, Danny was reunited with the hatchlings in a special chamber on the station. The moment he entered, all 12 dragons rushed toward him, making joyful sounds and nearly knocking him over with their enthusiasm. "We stay together," Scales said, his voice full of happiness. "Family stays together." "Yes," Danny said, hugging the young dragon. "We stay together, always." Shimmer bounced around them excitedly. "Danny, tell story now? Tell story about staying together?" Danny laughed, feeling lighter than he had in days. "Yes, I'll tell you a story. Let me think of a good one." He settled down with the dragons around him just like that first day when he had been so scared. But everything was different now. They were not scared refugees anymore. They were a family accepted by both their species with a future stretching out before them. "Okay," Danny began. "This is a story about a group of friends who went on a long journey. They came from different places and were different in many ways. But they learned that their differences made them stronger, not weaker." As he told the story, Danny noticed Elder Skyrend watching from the doorway. She had a thoughtful expression on her face. When their eyes met, she nodded slightly as if acknowledging something important. The hatchlings listened with complete attention, just as they always did. And Danny realized that this was just the beginning. They had won the right to stay together, but now came the hard work of actually. 6 months had passed since the council's decision. Danny stood in a classroom that had been designed for both humans and dragons. The room had high ceilings to accommodate wings, temperature controls that could adjust to different needs, and furniture that worked for beings of various sizes and shapes. 12 young dragons sat in front of him. They had grown noticeably in the past months. Their scales showed deeper, richer colors now. Their wings were stronger, able to carry them in short flights. But their eyes still held that same trust and affection when they looked at Danny. "Today," Danny announced, "we're going to talk about a story from Earth called The Ugly Duckling." Scales, now almost as tall as Danny when standing upright, made an interested sound. The other hatchlings settled in, their attention completely focused on their human friend. Danny had grown too, not just taller but more confident. He had spent the last months traveling between the Wanderer and the Dragon homeworld, learning about dragon culture while continuing to share human stories. The arrangement was not always easy. There were times when the cultural differences seemed too big to bridge, but somehow they always found a way. The program they had created was changing both species. Human children on the Wanderer now learned basic dragon history alongside their regular studies. Dragon hatchlings from other groups heard tales from Earth's storytelling tradition. Plans were being made for exchange programs, where young beings from both species could spend time learning about each other's worlds. As Danny finished the story of the duckling who discovered he was really a swan, Shimmer raised a foreclaw. Her English had gotten much better. So the duckling was actually a swan all along. He was not wrong or broken, just different? Exactly, Danny confirmed. Sometimes being different isn't a bad thing. It's just being yourself. Ember spoke up, her voice thoughtful. Like us, we are not broken dragons or incomplete humans. We are something new. Something better, Scales added, and the other hatchlings made sounds of agreement. Elder Skyrend, watching from the back of the classroom, felt something change inside her. For thousands of years, her people had believed that their way was the only correct way, that the bonding process must follow ancient traditions without change. But these hatchlings were thriving. They were growing into individuals who could move easily between dragon and human worlds, understanding both with equal skill. After the lesson ended and the hatchlings left for their afternoon flight practice with dragon instructors, Skyrim approached Danny. "I owe you an apology," she said. Danny looked up, surprised. "For what?" "When I first met you, I believed you had damaged the hatchlings by bonding with them. I thought they would be lesser beings for having been touched by an alien influence." She paused, her scales shifting to a color Danny had learned meant deep thought. "I was wrong. You have not diminished them. You have expanded their possibilities. They did the same for me," Danny admitted. "Before I met them, I was just a kid who read stories. Now I'm part of something bigger, something that might help lots of beings, not just these 12. Indeed you are." Skyrim looked out the window at the stars beyond. "Did you know that 5 other species have contacted us? They too have younglings who struggle during their development. They want to know about this storytelling method. Your stories may help more than just dragons." Danny felt overwhelmed by the idea. "I'm just one person. How can I teach everyone?" "You cannot," Skyrim agreed. "But you can teach others to teach. You can train both humans and dragons in the art of storytelling, so they can share it with younglings across the galaxy. You have shown us the path, Danny Cole. Now others will walk it with you." That evening, Danny recorded a message to his grandmother back on Earth. She had been following his adventure through regular communications, her pride clear in every reply. "Hi, Grandma," he said to the camera. "Remember when you used to tell me stories before bed? When I was scared of the dark or worried about starting school, you said stories had power, that they could change how we see the world." He smiled. "I think I finally understand what you meant. The stories you told me, they weren't just entertainment. They were lessons about courage and kindness and understanding. And now I'm passing them on, just like you passed them to me. Except my audience is a bit more unusual than you probably imagined." Through the window behind him, Scales flew past, practicing aerial moves with his siblings. The young dragon noticed Danny watching and performed a playful loop before flying off. "The hatchlings are doing great," Danny continued. "They're learning to fly properly, to control their fire breath, to understand their dragon heritage. But they're also learning about Earth, about humans, about all the different ways of seeing the universe. And I think that's making them stronger, not weaker." He paused, thinking about everything that had happened. "Captain Morris says what we're doing here could change the galaxy. That sharing stories across species could help everyone understand each other better. I don't know if that's true, but I hope so. I miss you, Grandma, but I think I'm where I'm supposed to be. Tell Mom and Dad I love them. I'll write again soon." He ended the recording and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were countless other species, other children, other stories waiting to be told and shared. The next morning brought unexpected news. A ship had arrived carrying representatives from 3 different species. They had young ones who were struggling with fear and developmental issues. They had heard about Danny's success with the dragon hatchlings and wanted to learn his methods. Danny felt nervous as he met with them. There was a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, one that resembled a walking tree, and one that was almost human-like but with skin that changed colors based on emotion. "We understand you use stories to help young minds develop," the jellyfish being said through a translator. "Can you teach us this method?" Danny thought about it. "I don't know if it will work the same way for everyone." The dragons responded to stories because they needed structure and comfort. "Your species might need different things," the tree being made a rustling sound. "But the principle is the same, yes? Using narrative to provide framework and emotional support?" "I guess so," Danny said. "But you'd need stories from your own cultures, too. Stories that mean something to your people. Then teach us how to adapt the method," the color-changing being suggested. "Show us the principles, and we will apply them to our own traditions." And so Danny began a new chapter in his life. He started teaching others about storytelling. Not just reading stories, but understanding why they worked, how they provided structure and meaning, how they helped young minds make sense of a confusing universe. Elder Skyrend helped him develop a curriculum. Dragon mentors contributed their knowledge of child development. Human teachers added their understanding of narrative structure and educational psychology. Together, they created something entirely new. The first class had students from 6 different species. Some were teachers, some were parents, some were caretakers like the ones who had died on the dragon nursery ship. All of them wanted to learn how to use stories to help their young ones. Danny felt strange teaching adults. But he realized he had something they needed. Not just knowledge, but experience. He had lived through the process of bonding with frightened young beings. He understood it in a way that textbooks and theories could not capture. The most important thing, he told his class, is to really listen, not just to the words but to the feelings behind them. When I first met the hatchlings, they couldn't speak English and I couldn't speak their language. But I could tell they were scared. So I told them stories about other beings who were scared and found courage. That's what they needed to hear. A tree being raised a branch-like appendage. But how do we know what they need to hear? You watch and you learn, Danny said. Every being is different. Scales needed stories about bravery. Shimmer needed stories about curiosity being a good thing. Ember needed stories about it being okay to be careful and take your time. You have to match the story to the individual. The weeks turned into months. Danny's students graduated and went back to their own worlds, armed with new knowledge about the power of storytelling. Reports started coming back of success. Young beings who had been struggling were now thriving, helped by caregivers who had learned to use narrative as a tool for development. The 12 original hatchlings continued to grow. They were adolescents now, their personalities fully formed. Scales had become a leader among dragon youth, known for his bravery and his unique perspective that combined dragon strength with human creativity. Shimmer was an explorer, always curious about new places and ideas. Ember had become a teacher herself, helping younger dragons who were shy or uncertain. One day, Danny received a message that surprised him. It was from the Galactic Council, the same one that had decided the hatchlings' fate months before. We would like to establish a formal position, the message read, Ambassador of Stories. Your role would be to travel between worlds, teaching the methods you have developed, helping species understand each other through shared narratives. We believe this could be a powerful tool for peace and cooperation across the galaxy. Danny showed the message to his parents.